Welcome to World Club of the Week. We have a very special guest this week, Darren Paul, who I'm not sure if he has some new responsibilities, but he has a new, I'm going to call it project going on. Darren, why don't you tell us about that new exciting project and just a little bit about yourself to get going?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Darren Paul. Hello. Pleasure to be on with you guys. So basically, for the last year, I've been involved with the Racing Club UK podcast, which, every so often, it's become much more regular as we've gone along. But we talk about Racing Club de Avellaneda, a wonderful team in Argentina that we'll be talking about today. And coming next week, we're really excited. We've got an official link with the club now that we will be their official UK-based, London-based filiale or like fan club, fan association. So a way for British fans to get closer, like I've always wanted to in the years I've been a wrestling fan, get closer with the club over there. So that's the exciting news that we've got coming up in the next couple of weeks or so.
Awesome. Do you want to say anything else more about the podcast that you do? And I know you do some other sports stuff too that may not be super relevant, but just so people have some idea of what you do in the sports world.
Yeah, for sure. In the sports world, I've got a lot of different hats. So I think primarily, if you see me on the internet, I'll be talking about two things. I'll be talking about British basketball, primarily the British Basketball League, where I've done some commentary. I do post-game videos with the London Lions, little stuff on their Facebook and writing in the occasional newspaper and things like that. When it comes to Racing Club, like I say, we've got the podcast. We're trying to get a bit more written content, and we do live tweets, live threads, talking about the games, and just trying to get the conversation going about Racing Club and be part of that. Really fantastic. I hate saying things like this, but Argentine football Twitter. But it is. There's loads of English fan accounts as well as some really brilliant accounts. Also on the podcast, we have some real heavy hitters of the Argentine football Twitterati, with Seba Garcia, of course, of Hand of Pod fame, Dan Edwards of Hand of Pod fame. He's come on also, and wrestling fans all over the world talking about the club that we absolutely adore. It becomes partier after a bit.
So I don't know if you had a chance to look at the questions. I think they're pretty. There's nothing groundbreaking. Evan came up with most of them, so I'm just gonna let Evan sort of take it from here. And that way, if there's any sort of like follow up to questions that he wants to ask, then he can just do that.
All right. So I guess my first question is, I didn't know this until I guess when Doug told me the times were UK times, and I was like, okay, so now I got to do some time conversion, figure out what time that means for me. We're talking about football in Argentina, so I guess why are you a fan of? And I'm sorry if I mispronounced this, because to me it's racing, but it's racing or however you're supposed to pronounce it. But why are you a fan of them?
So I'm a fan of Racing Club or Racing Club, as it would be to an English voice. It started in 2011-12. I was getting sick of the Premier League. I was getting sick of English football. So I'm from North Wales. Big up Colwyn Bay, the Seagulls. So I'm from there. I was born and raised Manchester United fan, and still have a lot of affiliation and fondness for Manchester United. But I was kind of done with the Premiership. I was sat down one Sunday watching Super Sunday, and it was just the worst. It was overly oh God, I sound like a right hipster. It was overly commercialised. It was in your face. It was Sky Sports. It was like, this is big, this is massive, and it was like West Brom, Everton. And no disrespect to those clubs, it wasn't big and it wasn't massive and it wasn't. I felt a disconnect as a football fan. I wasn't feeling love anymore. And I was stood in my kitchen at 1 o'clock in the morning because I was at university, and I was washing the dishes. I was listening to this podcast called Hand of Pod, and there was a man on there called Seba Garcia and Dan Edwards. And they were talking with such passion and love and real warmth for all of Argentine football, but also particularly Racing Club de Avellaneda. And that started from there. So I'd start to just follow them on Twitter and see what they were up to. And of course, we had Football para Todos there, where the Argentine government, in an attempt to get some popularity. I'm not entirely sure. They made all the games free on the internet, live, completely legit. So I was able to watch games. I was able to listen to games on the radio. Now, as we're speaking about off air, my Spanish is terrible, but still, it got me a little bit closer to the club and just follow their games. So, and I'll do that occasionally if I can't get a stream of games, particularly in Copa Libertadores, see if it's on the radio, and if I'm awake, I'll listen to it. And if not, I'll read a match report the next day. So yeah, it started from there, and then it became a real, I don't know, like addiction almost. I had to watch the games. I had to be in the conversations with people on Twitter. I had to start writing or talking or doing what I could. I did some commentary for a website called Rabble TV. Does anybody remember that,
Rabble? I can't say that I do.
It was a really fun little project where, and my dream has always been to be a sports commentator. Where you could do sports commentary. If you had the internet, you had some headphones, and boom, you were doing commentary. So I was doing that. I do
remember that, actually, now that you said what it is.
Yeah, it got a really weird rebrand a couple of years ago, turning it into, like, I don't know, Skype for football fans. But in its original form, I thought it was perfect for me. So I did loads of Racing games there. And again, it just took me even closer to the club and just built that love and affection. And so now when people speak to me and ask me, hey, who do you support? What's your football team? I say Racing Club de Avellaneda. And then they look at me like I've got two heads. And then we get into this conversation. But
so yeah, I'm going to interrupt you. So the Racing, I can deal with that. But what is the rest of it after that? The rest of the full,
yeah. So it's Racing Club de from and Avellaneda, which is the part of Argentina that Racing are from. It's not part of Buenos Aires City. I think it's part of the province. I'm not going to go too deep into that. Somebody
no, I do love geography, but maybe not all of the listeners would be as interested in that.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've said that a couple times. It sounds German when you say it, to be honest. To me, anyway. I'm not a German speaker, so Evan does speak some German. Did it sound German to you?
No, I think it's just like his English accent.
Yeah.
Trying to say something in Spanish, and it's just this weird mix that kind of comes out. Maybe sounding
probably
German.
Garbled mess. The double L in Argentine Spanish being a sh sound.
That's probably what I picked up as sounding German.
Too. Yeah.
So
you kind of already answered this a little bit, but maybe I can rephrase this question now.
Sure.
But why you answered kind of why you got into Argentinian football, but what does it offer that's maybe a little bit different from, like you said, the Premier League or over here the MLS, or if I wanted to watch other leagues in Europe that are more well known or more easily available to us to watch? Why should we get into Argentinian football, or what makes it special as opposed to other leagues around the world?
To take one of your points there, in terms of easy to watch, if I was, let's say I was a Premier League fan in England, where I'm currently based, I'd be spending hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds a year, right? I pay £8 a month to watch as much Argentine and Chilean football as I would like to. So that's one thing. I mean, it's cheaper, which is nice, but not the primary reason. The clubs in Argentina, they're more of they're a sports society. So, for example, I'm wearing a Racing Club basketball shirt. This isn't a shirt like just for sales in terms of, do you want an American football shirt? Do you want a baseball shirt in the style? This is actually the shirt of the basketball team that play in the like the second tier of Argentine basketball, for example. So there's a huge community element, which, I don't know, it really appealed to me. But in terms of the football itself, it's a bit grittier. Now, I love my non-league football and lower league football. Colin Bay, big up yourself. And it's got, I don't know, there's elements of it that are a bit earthy or a bit more pure football. I don't know, this sounds kind of nonsense. But when I talk to my friends, I'm saying, if you want to watch Argentine football, you are going to get some of the most beautiful football possibly out there. You'll see some wonderful, audacious individual skill and talent. And then you'll see some downright thuggery and some really robust tackling, which appeals to me. I think both of those elements equally. I enjoy some really silky footwork. I enjoy a crunchy tackle.
I can get behind
that. I think that's a good thing. Yeah, I think that's the colour, the sights in the stand, The fans, the stadiums all look very unique. Like Newell's Old Boys Stadium is set in a park, so it's got wonderful like geometry in the stadium itself. The colours are incredibly vibrant. There's something about a Newell's Old Boys game at night, but during the day you'll see it's just surrounded by trees, just loads of trees. It's just beautiful to look. It's aesthetically pleasing. Even down to lower league teams like Ferro. I enjoy watching Ferro games because I like seeing like the city backdrop behind their stadium. It's just these, I don't know, it's these things that they hit all the senses. The sound, the crowd, the commentary, if it's on, is just so passionate. I don't know really what they're saying. I hear it's not the most informed thing in the world, but again, it's that real passion, that heart and soul. It's still got heart, it's still got soul, and I think that's missing from leagues around the world, like the Premier League, for example. It just doesn't. We can pretend like, wow, we can have it sold to us by Sky. It's the best league in the world. For me, it isn't, and it hasn't been possibly ever, but certainly not for a long time. And it's lacking that heart, that soul. And people can't go to games over here. Like the normal football fan, I was looking to go to a QPR game because Seba Garcia, one of our contributors at Racing Club UK, he's a QPR fan. I'm thinking, I'll get down to keep it. 33 quid to go and see a championship game. Like, that's, I don't know. Feels like a lot. And
do you have any idea how much that is in like US dollars? I'm thinking it's like 50, but I don't.
It might be a little bit less than that now. But...
Yeah. It's tanked a little bit, but yeah, it's gonna be in that range. Like, it's not cheap at all. It's just daft money. So I don't know if I've answered your question. It's a fun league.
No, yeah. Oh, you answered my question. Evans too, I think.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I was sitting here thinking how, like, even, I mean, to us, I guess, for me to go to like an NBA game or NFL game, those are very, very pricey. Probably.
At least those are the top division, though. QPR is not even in the top division.
Yeah, I mean, that's true, but they have aspirations, I guess, and I don't know if that matters. But oh well. Moving on. So at Racing Club, I was trying to look to see. They have a lot of Argentinian players. I don't know if all South American leagues have this same rule, but they pretty much limit how many foreign-born players they can have. I know Brazil does this, and Argentina does this. Like, I think they max out at like 5.
Maybe I think it's 5 in a match day squad.
Okay, so if there's not like a famous Argentinian player that has come through there, at least, you know, not the Messis of the world, but like, have there ever been any world famous players that have made their way through Racing Club? And then, like, kind of a second question to that, maybe they're not world famous, but who are some players that are very noteworthy that maybe we should know about, but we don't know about?
So in terms of world famous, I've delved into the history of the club a little bit. So you've got a player like Norberto Raffo, who he didn't come through at Racing. He was there for like the 66 championship, the 67 Copa Libertadores win over Nacional, and 67 Intercontinental Cup against Celtic. So he's a big player in Racing history, though I don't think that quite answers your question. A player that might do a bit more is a player called Orest Carbotta. Now, he played in the 58 World Cup, scoring 3 goals. He was known as the chairman of the wing. I was speaking to a couple of my Argentine Racing friends about him, and they referred to him as like Garrincha-like in his play. And in 2006, he was inducted into the Racing Hall of Fame. There's a street named after him, and he's held in incredibly high regard. Another player that people may be a bit more familiar with, again, a little bit from Racing history, is Ubaldo Filial, who won the 78 World Cup with Argentina. He didn't spend a huge amount of time at Racing initially. He was only there for a season or so, but he saved 6 penalties in his debut season in 1972, which is ridiculous. And he went off and he did something that 2 very famous Racing players did. He went off and had a fabulous career in Europe. I think he played for Atletico Madrid and was a world champion with them as well. When he came home, he won the Inter-America and South America Supercopa in 1988, which was one of the final times that competition was run. And as I understand it, it was all of the former South American champions would play a tournament, and the winner of that was the Supercopa winner. So Racing won that in 88, which is something that the club's quite proud of. And he was the best keeper in the world for a time. So those are 2 or 3 players from way back in the day. Our current director of football is Diego Milito, who should be familiar with all European football fans. Came through at Racing as a youth, won the championship in 2001, and that was massive because that was after a really difficult spell in the club's history, bankruptcy, near relegation. It was not a good time. So Racing won the title, and Milito was a part of that. I'm not going to say he was a huge part of that, but he was, significant enough. He went off to Europe. He played for Zaragoza. He played for Inter Milan, of course, famously winning the Champions League with Mourinho. He played for somebody else who deserved me to remember. I forget who they are. God, what are they called? Italian club.
We can just start naming Italian clubs.
Yeah, he played at Genoa.
No.
And then
yes, I think it was Genoa. Yeah, that's the one, Genoa. So he played for them, and then he came home.
I think it's Genoa. Just
Genoa.
So
yeah.
Okay. Genoa.
I think so. I don't speak Italian, but I think so.
So he came home. He came back to Avellaneda, the hero, Diego Milito, and he took a team that was terrible, fun but terrible, and took them to another league title. So he's the first player since the 60s or 50s even to win 2 titles at Racing Club. And there's one other player who is, I think, has been very high standard, if not world class. Lisandro Lopez did the Milito, came through as a youth in the mid 2000s, went to France and then Portugal, and then popped about the world a bit. But he was a real big player in Europe, playing for that Lyon side with Hugo Lloris. So they have an affinity. Hugo Lloris, one of the more famous Racing fans you'll see around the world. And now he's come back to Racing and may just lead us to another title as we currently sit top of the pile. So those are a couple of the real big, well-known players. Of course, Diego Simeone, he started his managerial career at Racing after finishing his club career playing with us. And there's one other player. I don't think he fits into this category, but I've got to plug him anyway. Luciano Wade. He joined us after playing for, I think it was Quilmes. He won a title with us. He was a wonderful player, my favourite footballer possibly ever. And now he's off winning champions and just bossing it in Chile. So just had to plug my boy there.
No problem. So I guess delving a little bit more into their history, I noticed like they came into the top league like somewhere around 1910, 1911, and then they started to just win every single title they could for like the next decade or so. But since then, they haven't really had a whole lot of sustained success. You've mentioned sometimes in the 50s and the 60s, and then like maybe a title or two in the 80s. So do you know, first, again, another 2-part question here. First, do you know why they were so successful so early on? And then second, is there any explanation for why they haven't really dominated the league on a continued basis like they did back in their early days?
It's a difficult question for me to answer. I'm going to give it a red hot crack. But as a non-native to Avellaneda in Argentina, the history of the club is something that I am working at learning. But Racing was the first. We're known as El Primer Grande. Hear me say we. We're known as El Primer Grande, the first big club, essentially. Because after Alumni, Racing was the first Creole or like native Argentine champions, and they became heptacampeons. They won 7 leagues in a row. And there's only 2 other clubs in the world who have done that, Olympique Lyonnais and Juventus, who look horribly close to making that 8 in a row. So that side that won the heptacampeon, they played 121 games. They won 105. They lost 5 and they drew 11. That is a ridiculous record for a 7-year stretch. And I think, I could be wrong, that it was based a lot on a really solid defense. One year, 1915, they conceded 5 goals in a season, scoring 95. So really strong defense and really wonderful attacking play going forward. Now, Now, from my understanding of Argentine football, which again is growing, like if you ask me a question about Racing 2014 onwards, I think I'm pretty good. But Argentine football has been very cyclical in nature. You've had the rise of Independiente, who have been very dominant locally as well as intercontinental. They are like the winningest team in Copa Libertadores history. Boca and River, they really just started to dominate the league. They had, they are the big two in Argentina. There are 5 grandes: Racing, Independiente, River, Boca Juniors, and San Lorenzo. So that's an established thing. It doesn't vary year by year. They are like the big 5, the grandes. But really, it's Boca and River who have been battling it out, and they get the best players. Like the best players on our history tend to leave us and go to River or Boca. So I'm suggesting that the dominance of those 2 clubs, from a historical, from a political, from a financial point of view, is going to be part of the reason why Racing have had the dips, like every other Argentine club has had. So some really strong spells, like the first ever intercontinental champions when we beat Celtic in '67. But just I think finances has been a big part of it as well. So it's fan owned, the club. I understand that's been the case for quite a lot of the history, but that hasn't meant we've kept our best players or had the best facilities. Like during the I think it was the 80s or maybe the 90s, the top deck at El Cilindro was closed for safety reasons, for example. That's now something that's being rectified and work is being done year on year. I'm sort of straying from your question there.
That's fine. It transitions into the next question, because it's more about the history a little bit, which was, and you alluded to this earlier, was the 1998 bankruptcy. And I was just curious how that may have affected the club, or if since you've only been a fan you haven't been a fan since back then. I was going to ask you how it affected you as a fan, but how do you know how it affected the club? You said they were about relegated in that time period, but then I think they won the league like 3 seasons after that, like in 2001. So they obviously had a pretty good bounce back after that. But do you know how that bankruptcy went in 1998 and how it affected the club?
It was horrendous. It was horrendous for the club. You speak to Racing fans, so I met up with a few of my fellow fans the other day, and they were talking about the bankruptcy, and they were talking about the insolvency and where the ownership that came in to bail out the club, the private ownership, which is something that they're trying to bring in large scale in Argentina, and fans are very resistant to, and Racing Club fans in particular, because we've been there, and it means that the club society, it ceases to be a society. It becomes a football club, it becomes a business, which is part of the reason why I fell out of European football, or at least Premier League football. It's because there are no societies over here. They are just businesses. So like the women's team, for example, that was cut, despite having once been quite good. I understand it's back now and it's thriving, top of the women's league. But yeah, it wasn't a good time for fans, despite the 2001 title. Now I could be getting it slightly wrong, so please don't hate on me, fellow Racingistas. But it wasn't good. It's a good thing the club was saved, but the changes that happened and the fact that it became less of a sports society as a result of that, and the private ownership and just selling off loads of players too early, too young, so that we didn't see the full benefit of them or reap the full benefit of them financially, potentially. There's a couple of things that, as far as my understanding, that was the case.
Well, okay, that's good. I think that's all of our historical questions. We're now going to move kind of these next 3 or more this season, or the maybe slightly past season. But no, I guess that would still technically be this calendar year. But they're currently in first place of the league. I think they have won the most games in the league, and they've lost 1 game. Second place team has not lost a game yet, but they have drawn a lot. And so Racing's currently in first. Do you think that they'll be able to hold on and win the league this year? We're a little bit halfway through. I think about 15 out of 25 games, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. We have a very difficult month of February. The Copa Sudamericana starts, so we've got 2 fixtures against Corinthians, who, whilst they're not quite where they were, they're still going to be tough opposition. We're also playing River, Independiente, and we've got a couple of other fixtures that aren't quite coming to mind right now. So it's going to be tough. I'm confident, though, because we've got a really, really good set of players. Eduardo Chacho Cudet is doing a really, really fantastic job in charge, and Diego Milito, as our director of football, he's brought in some really nice pieces. So I'm very confident that we can do it. I think we've certainly got the squad to do it. The one game that we lost was against San Martin de Tucumán, who were just promoted, hadn't won a game all year, and there we go. They beat the best team in the division. So, these things happen. That's Argentine football. But no, we've been really, really solid the first half of the season. We should have beaten Boca. We drew with them 2-2. Chacho Cudet got a lot of criticism from me in particular about the way he handled the late game situation. We had a player sent off, and we didn't use all our substitutions very well, and it was a mess. But otherwise, there's no team better than us in Argentina right now. And with one exception of River Plate, who we play one fixture against, because they did us up they really battered us in the Copa Libertadores. It was quite ugly. We lost 3-0 in the return leg at their stadium.
The Bombonera?
No, that's Boca
That's
Juniors.
Boca, okay.
Oh, what's it called? Monumental. Oh, yeah, there we go. The Monumental. So we lost to them 3-0, and it could have been 6 or 7 because our keeper, Diaz, he just had a fantastic game. He should have been man of the match. If he wasn't officially, he was my man of the match. So they're the only team that give me any sort of concern. Everybody else we should be able to beat in the division. It's just playing on 2 fronts, because we got knocked out of the Copa Argentina embarrassingly early to some side that I've never heard of. But aside from that, no, it's all going well.
That's good. I was going to ask you about the Copa Libertadores and how you felt about it being 2 Argentinian teams this past championship, and maybe even how, like, this whole situation, how it ended up being played in Spain, which is just ridiculous.
How many hours do you want the show to be, Evan?
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, we can nix that part. I guess.
No, I can talk quickly about it if you'd like. I've got some things to say.
Give it a quick shout.
It was the final that everybody wanted and nobody wanted. It was a great opportunity for Argentine football to put on show the absolute best it could be. And I watched most Super Clásicos, and they're never very good. So I didn't have very high hopes for the football being played. But actually, from what I gather from the games, and I've seen bits and bobs, I wasn't about to sit down and watch 2 sides that I dislike playing. But it could have been the greatest advert the Argentine game is ever going to get, aside from maybe Racing Independiente in a final. But there we go. They blew it. And River Barra, they blew it. Because, there's lots of political talk. Apparently the police raided. They found loads of tickets. So the River Barra decided that this game's not going ahead. We're going to attack the Boca bus. It's a real shame. It's kind of ridiculous that it got played in Spain of all places. I would assume that it got Montevideo or Chile or anywhere in South or even North America. I think Miami was on the cards for a bit. I did watch the extra time of the final, the second leg rather, and it looked weird. It just looked weird, didn't it? Watching Argentine football in the Bernabeu, but it was kind of cool at the same time. But
so I know I would suggested we shouldn't talk about this for a long time, but I will say that the official word on why it was played in Spain is because there is a large Argentine community there. I don't know if that's true. I'm sure they have to say something, but that's what was said. So that seems like a good reason.
Yeah. I mean, that seems reasonable. Again, you could have played it in Chile or Paraguay or Uruguay, places closer to the actual Argentines.
For sure.
Heck, you could have even played that in a different stadium in Argentina, theoretically.
No.
Mar del
Yeah,
Plata.
I mean, just like Miami has, I mean, like it's associated with Cuban immigrants, not Argentinian, you know, so like that one wouldn't have made much sense. That one would have been like, hey, let's get some American dollars. That's what that would have been.
Yeah,
Which, I mean,
that's kind of how I feel like it'd be against Spain.
Which may well have been, but apparently there's a large community there. So it is what it is.
Well, I guess the last question I have here is bouncing off of that is, do you think that racing has a chance to win the Libertadores in the next, I gave it 3 seasons, assuming their success this season carries over to next season, if they were able to win it next season or 1 or 2 seasons after that. So you think they have a good chance?
I think we've got a chance in the Sudamericana, assuming that we're able to maintain our league form. Because if we were to lose 1 or 2 league games or start to slip down that table, and whilst we've got a cushion to Defensa Justicia and Tucumán, if that starts to get eroded, see you later, Copa Sudamericana. Coudet wants a league title. But I think we can win the Sudamericana right now. Again, I look at it until the Copa Libertadores teams come in. I look at it and there's no team that we're not better than. I genuinely believe that Racing has such a squad. When we're looking down the line a couple of years, that's where it gets really difficult. After our last title in 2014, we had a really solid. We kept a lot of that core, but I think we lost a couple of the big pieces. Centurion, he went off. We lost our right winger as well. Was it Viola? No, it wasn't Viola. I forget who it was, but Auche, might have been Auche. He went off as well. And that meant that we brought through the kids, Marcos Acuna and Oscar Romero, 2 fabulous players. Oscar Romero is currently playing in China. I think it's a travesty. He should be playing in a much higher league. And there's talk that River wants him. Personally, I hope he goes. I hope he goes to River and has a great career time over there because he's such a wonderful player. I digress. We've got a lot of talented players right now. We've got Mateo Saracho, who, if we can keep him till June, July time, wrap up the season, we'll be lucky because he's the real deal right now. We've also got Solari, who he'll probably go in the next window. And I don't know quite if we've got the youth players to come through our academy, which is well known. Our academy is fantastic. We keep bringing through these fantastic players, or at a minimum finishing off these fantastic players, your Romeros, your Acuñas, the like. So short answer, I don't know. I'm not massively confident that we've got what it takes to win the Libertadores in the next couple of years, simply because I don't know how well we'll keep hold of our players. Let's just say, ideal world, we keep our players and we add some strength and we add a new young striker, because Svitanic, who we've just signed, and Licha, they're not quite the youngest players in the world, despite Licha being the best finisher in Argentina right now. If we get the reinforcement and if we can maintain our core, there's every chance. I wouldn't rule us out, but if we don't keep those core pieces, then it's all up in the air.
All right. Well, that's all good stuff. Doug, did you have any questions you wanted to add?
Yeah, I realized as I was looking at this list, when I was doing Music Monument podcast for 8+ years, we always ended with a question that sometimes didn't have anything, and that's just fine if you don't have anything, Darren. But sometimes it's some great stuff. But the question is simply, is there anything else that we should know or that you want to say?
Is there anything else?
Again, no is a perfectly good answer. So.
I don't know. I'm just thinking, like, we've got the Racing Club Londres filial launching next week, so that's really great. And if this conversation that we've had made you think, ooh, Racing Club, I would urge you to have a look go on the Racing Club website or Twitter, get involved with us, get involved with any of the filials. There's a couple in America. I think there's about 3 different filials or fan clubs in America. So the global outreach of Racing is growing, and I think that's a really cool, wonderful thing. Here's something I learned this week in my massive mammoth Racing meeting the other day. Racing Club have a school. We have a private school in Avellaneda, I think primarily for academy kids, but also it's a private school for just 500 children. So the social work that Racing Club do is just remarkable. We've got recycling initiatives. We've got like disability like football teams on a mass scale. We've got these amazing infrastructure for sports teams, amateur teams, youth teams. We've got figure roller skating, which I didn't realize was a thing, but it's apparently very popular. We've got gymnastics, we've got boxing. It's all these things, and it's just a wonderful community. And this is the same thing that we see in a lot of Argentine teams, like Ferro, for example. They've got a really successful baseball team. San Lorenzo, their basketball team, is one of the best teams on the planet right now. Below the NBA, but at FIBA level, they are like spot on. So what I just want to say is basically, this is the beauty of Argentine football, and for football clubs across Europe, for example, of course, we have Real Madrid, the best basketball team in Europe right now. But this is what Premier League football should be, could be, has more than enough money for, if they were to fully get behind. If Manchester United brought back their basketball teams like they had in the 80s or something like that, what a force they could be. They would easily topple the Leicester Riders or your London Lions. No offense to either of those teams, but with more resource and all of this stuff. So I don't know. I love this club. I love what it does on a more than a football pitch basis. And then every match day, of course, it just goes up even more. So did I have a lot? I don't know, but that's just what I have to say.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it's great. So just for like any other future guests that we have on, yeah, it can be anything. One thing about Music Monument is a lot of times it would be like non-music stuff. They would be like, oh yes, I'm actually like a professional painter. And we're like, this is how do we go through an hour interview, which is what Music Monument were, and like not know that like you were a professional painter, that like the music is just like a side thing you do for fun. How do we not know that? But yeah, that's totally cool.
Sadly not.
Yeah. I want to say that if you're seeing this one for the first time as viewers, we did talk a little bit about in our first show what this show is all about and sort of like what you can do to get involved and stuff. We're going to try to keep these on the shorter side, so we're not going to talk about that every week unless go down in those comments, leave us nasty things, because this is YouTube and that's what you're going to do. But also tell us, what you want to see in the show. If you like it better with just me and Evan. Darren, you're our first guest. I don't know if I mentioned that.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, so it was all, yeah, well, thanks so much for doing it with hey, this is how it's gonna work, because we didn't know. But yeah, if you love this and you want us to make sure we have like actually people that know what's going on every week instead of just me and Evan, then tell us and we'll do what we can to make that happen. And we're gonna try to make that happen regardless, but it's just not gonna be possible every time. Probably there's gonna be some countries where finding somebody that speaks English is gonna be tough, and my Spanish is also terrible. And Evan, your German's pretty terrible too, right?
Yeah, it's the same with my Spanish right now. Is I can read it and I can probably understand it if you give me something in text. I can obviously use Google at that point, but I
was gonna say my Spanish is not even that good. I mean,
yeah. So if I remember things like "day" means of or from. So when he said that, I was like, "Hey,
yes, I know that too." Yeah, awesome. Well, Darren, thanks so much. This has been another World Club of the Week.